Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. I am super excited and thrilled for our guest today. He is a mental fitness strategist, best-selling author, the host of Behind the Human podcast, known for helping individuals and high-performing teams unlock their full potential, cognitive potential. He investigates the mental habits of world-class thinkers, visionaries, and performers. His acclaimed book, Personal Socrates, brings in these philosophies to life and transforming questions and routines of inspiring legends like Kobe Bryant and James Clear. The CEO and co-founder of Molesi, I think I'm pronouncing that right, but please welcome Marc Champagne. Marc, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here, brother. I can't wait to dive in. We've had a few chats prior to hitting record, and I think the energy and synergy is there. So that's I've been looking forward to this.
It's awesome. Well, I appreciate, again, you being here. And sorry for that full mouthful of an intro, but I wanted to give you your full acclaim. But Marc, as you know, I love talking about the endurance mindset. So I'm curious, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Oh, unexpected. That's a really good question. Well, I never really thought about it until, I had to think about it. And a bit of this backstory, but there was a point in my journey where I jumped out of the corporate world and started to really dive into what I call mental fitness. And of course, I was thinking about endurance in that sense, but I don't think I really, truly had to live what that actually means until I was in a place where it felt like my world was falling apart. I had shut down a business that was something that obviously I was really attached to and looking forward to bringing to the world and so forth. So it just felt like everything was crumbling. And it was one of the first times in my life where I had felt the feelings of losing hope. And if it wasn't for bringing in, again, what I call mental fitness and, I think what links really well to what you're saying, mental endurance, if it wasn't bringing into those principles and that way of thinking, I'd probably still be in a deep depression. It's what paused all of those negative looping thoughts and so forth and kind of brought me out the other side. And now it's, I had the practices in place or some of them as I was going or building that business, but now it's the absolute non-negotiable in all things, including being a dad and a partner and a business owner and so forth.
Could you go a little bit deeper in those principles that you mentioned?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to figure out, at least for me, in its simplest term, is what do I need to do for my mind to feel clear or motivated or inspired when I need those feelings, being conscious of the fact that, we don't live in a world where it's all rainbows and butterflies all the time. But I would argue, and I wish this wasn't the case because I do see this in teams that I work with, the vast majority of people are operating in this state of a survival state and not feeling great, right, most days. And I just think as humans, we don't deserve that. We deserve to feel good more days than not. And it happens to align well. And I don't have to share data for this. I think everyone listening would appreciate it. When you feel good, you typically think better and things are flowing, people are calling, you're seeing opportunities, and it's just, a hell of a better way to live in my opinion. So for me, it's just making sure that I'm always checking in with myself on a daily basis, and it could be as short as possible as, as the coffee's brewing, like, how do I feel today? One word, what's fueling that check-in or that emotion? And is there anything I can do or that I have control of that I can, either cut some of that fuel source if it's an unwanted emotion. And equally important, if I'm feeling fantastic, like why? What is it, right? And that came up recently. We were just chatting about sports and biking before we hit record. I was training for a kind of an annual trip, which for me was the training piece was getting up early in the morning and kind of literally at 6 o'clock, I was in the mountains on the bike, and I'd be home and having that first cup of coffee afterwards, feeling just alive, right? Starting the day in nature and on the bike and clearing the mind and physical exercise and so forth. So just knowing that, okay, that's one thing that I know puts a huge smile on my face and starts my day in a beautiful way. Am I prioritizing that kind of activity? And if I can't, because that, you've got to put the bike on a car and go somewhere, and it takes a little bit more uh, logistical prep. But what's the next best thing then, right? That gets to that same emotion, and just making sure that those kind of practices are in check, especially when we have big things going on in our lives, personally and professionally, where we need to be at our sharpest and be on our A game.
You know, what you just commented there made me think about burnout. Because as an endurance athlete, right, full distance Ironman sort of things, I've got guests on the show have done ultras and hundreds of miles and just really magnificent feats. But at some point in time during your training, you get that sense of burnout, right?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, how do your principles apply to that? Like, what could we do to sort of help us through that dark day, that midwinter training session that you got to do on your trainer down in the basement when nobody's watching, and you just don't want to get it done because you've
Yeah.
done it 15 times in the last 14 days. Like, do you have a principle there that can help sort of us break through that burnout feeling?
Yeah, I do, but I mean, before that, I feel like it's appropriate to note, because I think it's such a really good example when you speak about Ironmans, and I think for those maybe who aren't in it, and even those who are, I mean, how much work an Ironman is. We A lot of the kind of the first reactions would be like, "That's wild, that's crazy. I can't imagine doing that physically," and so forth, right? And what I see, though, is that we're literally doing that with our minds day in and day out in average working days, most people. And that's why that we have such mental health challenges out there, and why so many people are burning out, because it's like you're doing a 12 to 14-hour high intensity workout for the mind without any recovery, and just rinse and repeat, right? Like, we're on non-stop. So I think it's just important to note that, and I don't say that from a place of judgment, but if that's you, and sometimes I'm in that place as well, let's not judge ourselves, but let's just use that as data, and use the physical example of, we know where that leads if you don't recover and don't rest. Like, it's your point, you burn out, and physically you burn out, and then mentally, obviously, we're burning out. So with that in mind, I mean, the thing that I've found that has worked the best, and you'll get this as an athlete, is to really have an event in mind. Because you could say, just sticking with the example of physical exercise, you can say, I'm going to exercise for every day for the, all of the rest of my life, kind of thing. And of course, you're going to have health benefits because of that. But it's very different to say that I'm training for an Ironman this date. You
Mhm.
have a routine, you have a specific training protocol to follow, and you have that goal always in mind, that when it's, freezing, I mean, I'm in Canada, I mean, it's still warm now, thankfully, but once February hits and it's freezing cold, I mean, I don't want to go outside and train, or it's dark. I think that's the one that nails me the most. So you're waking up at 5:30 and it's pitch black outside for the
Yeah.
next couple hours. It's not the most motivating environment to go train. But at least for me, what helps is, well, if I'm training for something, then I can remind myself of that. And Kobe Bryant did the same thing. I remember doing the research, as he's one of the profiles in the book. He talked about this. I think it was he had this fourth workout in his schedule, where most of the team members didn't have that additional workout. And there was something to the effect where he's like, I didn't like getting up at 4:30 in the morning. I mean, he was under the covers like the rest of us. When the alarm goes off, it's nice and warm, comfortable in here. And it's not like he sprung out of bed and thought, oh, I can't wait to do this. But the year prior, they lost in the finals for the NBA championship, and he felt, in a way, personally responsible for that, and made a commitment to himself that he was going to lead better. And this was one of the ways that, he was showing up for himself and the team. So once you have the narrative, because it always happens, we can out negotiate ourselves a million times, right? Think how easy, and you've probably done this and I've done it. Like, you know what? I'll just slip that extra workload in at 2:30 instead. I have a little open block. Then life happens. Something comes up. It never happens, right?
Right.
Your day is hijacked. So it's like we just have to cut that mental negotiation and just remember, okay, wait a second. I'm doing this because of X. And for the mental fitness side of things, it doesn't have to be a physical feat or an Ironman or so forth. It could be as simple as, here's my protocol. Here are the practices. Here are the things that I'm committing to myself for the next quarter. And I have these deliverables, either personally or professionally, that we can tack it on. This is how I need to perform. This is what I've identified as is important. Now the next step is understanding, okay, what does my mind need to be at its best performance level throughout those next couple months? And then that's the thing that you're coming back to when it starts to loop and you try to negotiate yourself out of doing the practice.
So you touched on it slightly, talking about like the corporate side. Like for me, if I've got an event on the calendar, I've got a race in 6 months, to your point, that's a big part of the motivation.
Yeah.
But I struggle to see sort of how that coincides with my corporate life or my business life or my family life. It's a little bit harder to define an event. So I was hoping, Mark, you could expand on sort of how we can sort of create a similar situation with respect to your family life or your business life.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the easiest way is to take some concepts that are a little bit more well known or that we're used to going through, and that's just, some level of goal setting, right?
Mhm.
I mean, there's usually some goals for the year, sort of some intentions, whether those are revenue targets or activities or strategies and so forth. But then, of course, I mean, I think the best leaders and some of the best thinkers that I've seen obviously break those down into smaller chunks. And you're, well familiar of this with some of the work that you're doing in EO and so forth. Like, you break them down, right? And then you have goals for the quarter. So it to me, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than literally taking 30 minutes to review what the objectives are professionally. And you can do this with your family as well. But professionally, and then that's when you layer on the plan. Like, okay, so, for the next 2-3 months, you know what? I've always wanted to try some sort of guided breathing. Let's try that for the next 2 months and see how it affects my mind in relation to these objectives. And then maybe take some things that already work, right? Like, I know journaling is a staple in my mental fitness practice. I know, getting out into nature is will always help. But then also looking at, what kind of mental nutrition do you want to prioritize for the next 2-3 months? Again, no different than what you're doing in the physical world. I mean, you're not going to eat like garbage leading up to an Ironman because you're going to feel that on the bike or on the road or in the water, right? So it's like, okay, well, if I have this big event coming up, I don't know what it is. Maybe you're preparing for an exit. Maybe you're buying a company. Maybe you're delivering a huge brand pitch to a client, whatever that thing is. Well, leading up to that, let's make sure you're fueling your mind with good inspirational content, podcasts. Obviously, we're a bit biased. I mean, always encourage a good podcast. Books, right? Stoic philosophy, always really good nuggets in there to shift perspective, especially when you're looping in negative thoughts and so forth. So there's a million different things, but the key is to figure out, it's a simple question. What can I do to ensure my mind is operating at peak levels? And what does that look like for content in or nutrition in? And what does that look like for any kind of activities or rituals and so forth? And it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that.
That's super helpful. Would you also, I think we talked about this prior to connecting today, but like you mentioned mental nutrition, and what the concept that came to mind was a sort of a mental audit, right? Of like, what
Yeah.
are we consuming? Can you talk to that a little bit more of what the red flags are, what are some benefits, like how an individual should go through or could go through sort of a mental audit.
Yeah, no, it's a great, I mean, because the reality of the situation is I guess you could say we forget what we consume, or maybe that's intentional, and we're kind of blocking that. But again, I like to compare it to things that, we've maybe all done, or that stick out that are a little bit easier, like a food audit. That's the one that comes to mind right away. I mean, it's easy to go through the day, and if you literally just write down everything you eat in one day and then review it at the end of the day, often we're like, "Oh, gosh, okay, so here's the problem," right? If you're facing something like that. So same thing. I mean, thankfully we have, this is where I think the tech is helpful. I mean, Apple does a decent job on screen time, so you can take a look at your report and just see, okay, for this week, and understand, okay, where is my time actually going to? And being, again, not from a place of judgment, but just let's use it as data so that then we can do something and make different decisions. But same thing, like, just you can write down. Like, I mean, I'm a fan of, like, because everything's digital, of course, and I use a lot of these tools. But sometimes it's nice to just be a little bit tactical and step outside of that world for half a second. Just get yourself a week by week or a daily planner of some sort, and just, again, it doesn't have to be crazy. Just say, you know what, this week I'm just going to commit to writing down hour by hour what I did and what I consume. And you'll see it. You'll see it immediately. You'll probably notice within the first 2 days, like, okay, I can see some patterns here. At 2 p.m. I go here, and I'm just randomly scrolling on social media networks and so forth, which, like, do I really want to be doing that? Is there a reason? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, being in those networks, but strategically place that, right? If that's showing up the first thing in the morning, I would argue that's probably some of your most valuable mental real estate time. I mean, I don't want to be giving that to the algorithms. I want to be doing good thinking and making decisions at that time, right? Or creative work and so forth. So just, figuring out a way that you can have a simple audit. And then from there, the kind of the big question that usually rocks people is, okay, I'm looking at this now. Does this behavior and do these habits support what I want to be achieving in the next 2-3 months? It's usually a yes or no.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. You're making me think of my morning routine, and they're usually like after the cup of coffee and the kids are off to school. It's, oh, let's do Wordle, let's do connections, let's do this. And to your point, that's prime real estate time that I should be spending doing something more creative, especially in the early hours of the morning.
Yeah. Well, and you can pop that in, maybe just adjust the time, like give yourself, that's a good just mental break. Or I mean, really it's good mental exercise as well. But like maybe that's a 2 p.m. kind of activity, or right at the end of the day to bookend your day. So, this is the end of the day. I like to do these kind of puzzles and this kind of mental thinking. Do it at the end of the day. And that's how I'll wrap, right?
Yeah, I'll give that a try. Well, I'm gonna change topics on you a little bit. I'd love for you to tell the audience a little bit more about your story, how you got into this, how we
Yeah.
are here today, sort of background.
Yeah, well, I mean, it all kind of originated, excuse me, I started off in the corporate space in healthcare, and I was I think, almost pretty close to being straight out of university, and started in this role, a sales role, where in that time of, I guess, time in history, companies used to hire people in batches. And I feel like that's a little less normal these days. But I mean, in my case, there are new products and so forth, and they would hire a sales force for the entire country. So I was part of that makeup for a healthcare company, and we were all flown out to Montreal, Canada for, gosh, I think it was 3 weeks straight of training. It was, even that is unheard of now. And I just remember thinking, okay, so this is a sales function, and we're all being essentially trained in the same, models and sales techniques and so forth based on our education. We're all being given the exact same products, the exact same tools and so forth. Yet there, as most sales functions, there are bonus structures and incentives and, trips and stuff like that if you're at the top. So it's like, okay, well, how possibly am I going to stand out if literally we're being spit out all in the same way? And at that time, I didn't realize why. have some reflections now where this came from as a young child, but the decision was, well, I'll get up 10 minutes earlier in the morning and just consume positive content, which,
Mm.
today I call mental nutrition. I didn't know that at the time. And I was reading Success Magazine. I was reading blog posts by, Tony Robbins and all these different people that were excelling in their life and so forth, that it would it would just set the frame for, or the perspective for the day. I would just start in a really good positive mental state. And I quickly realized that all of the people I was reading about or studying, they were all asking really powerful, reflective questions, personally and professionally. And I would write down those questions, and then either in the moment, just journal with them, or the next morning, that was kind of, I would just write it down in my notebook and leave it there, knowing the next morning I'm like, I'm gonna get to reflect on this question. And it's almost like something to look forward to. And, just the practice itself really opens up, just checking in with yourself and making good decisions, and kind of developing or training those self-awareness muscles and so forth. I did that for a decade, and eventually got to this point where I saw a gap in the market on the digital front, where there were no digital tools to help people into a guided journaling practice like how I was using the questions, and essentially set out to create that product. And that was Keo, which at the time
Mm.
was the first guided journaling app. And myself and my brother-in-law brought it to the market, and that really sparked it was the shift from, yes, I was using some of these practices and learning from others personally, to why aren't more people doing this? Like, if there's nothing special from what I'm doing, but it seems like 100% of the people I'm reading about are doing this kind of practice, but everyone else doesn't really know about it. So that was the driving force of, and it still is the driving force of everything I do today.
That's awesome. Well, let's talk about what you're doing today. I mean, obviously, maybe it's not so obvious. You're helping people through this journey. Can you give us a little bit more detail of like how types of people you're working with, groups you like to get involved with, et cetera?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's a bit of a split. I mean, the way I spend my time, well, what the through line is really making the concept and the idea of mental fitness more accessible to more people around the world. And you mentioned the book, and I've got another two books are being written or in the works right now. So there's that side of things, along with the podcast. So there's the content piece. The probably where I spend the majority of my time is either working directly with leadership teams, and or their teams, to do exactly what we're talking about. Let's
Mm.
take a look at what you're trying to achieve business wise, or what's getting in the way, and let's make sure that, starting with leadership as well as your team, that you're mentally fit and able to do so. Because the data that I see is that well over 60% of teams are not mentally fit. And that, I mean, you don't have, there's so much data to support this now, but I always like to look at it like from a common sense perspective. If you're in survival mode, you're not doing your best work. You're not
Mm.
thinking at your best. You're missing what people are saying or not saying, right? Especially in a sales environment. It's the ability to pick up on the nonverbal and what's not. You can't pick that up if you're, in this state of high stress, which a lot of people are. So for me, it's just, this stuff isn't earth shattering. I'm not suggesting, and I did this with your group. I mean, I'm not suggesting we go on a silent retreat together. I mean, that's a fantastic opportunity, but I'm talking about, how do we win the seconds of the day with simple check-in practices while your coffee's brewing, or after lunch as a mental reset. And that's what I study from, people of today, but then also many people of the past that we consider some of the most innovative thinkers and brilliant business leaders, to bring this stuff to light and integrate it into modern day society.
So what's a leading indicator that a team or an individual isn't mentally fit?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of so the assessment, the categories there that we measure revolve around sleep. So most teams and most individuals are underslept or aren't sleeping in a quality way. So even if you're listening, there's kind of no way around it. I mean, you should be getting anywhere between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. I mean, people talk about 8 or so forth. Um, sure, there's exceptions in some cases, but the average is that. And I would say probably 80% of people listening right now are not getting that, just based on the data that I'm seeing. So just again, it's just data. Let's not judge it. But sleep is one of the most important things for all things humanly, from a human function perspective. It's when our mind heals, our body heals, all of that kind of stuff. So if, as a sign, and I got this from interviewing someone from Whoop, one of the sleep tracking companies. Kristen Holmes was on the show, and I said, "Okay, Kristen, this might be a little unconventional for your world, but if people don't have devices to track their sleep, what question would you ask yourself to gauge on how you're doing?" And she said, "Am I sleepy when I want to be sleepy, and am I alert when I want to be alert?" And that, to me, I think we can all, do you want to still be alert and thriving at 3 p.m. but feel completely exhausted? Something's off, right? It could be your sleep, but it could also be the way that your day is stacked. A lot of I interview a lot of CEOs, and the best ones, people don't know this, but they actually don't have their calendars stacked back to back with back-to-back meetings. There's time in between, typically, to process and think, right? So like, we need that. We can't just keep jamming stuff into our minds. And again, coming back to that like high intensity workout for the mind, and just expect it to continually show up. So sleep and alertness and so forth, I think is good. I think getting to the end of the day and just always feeling completely burnt, or that our families and partners get the depleted version of us, is a telltale sign as well. If you're irritable or waking up, just kind of dreading the day, there's some stuff going on there as well, right? If you're, the other big one is if you're reacting instead of responding in situations, that you're kind of knee-jerk reaction. You have a knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, well, like, why are they sending this, or why would they say that? You're on edge, right? Like your nervous system is just activated because it's on survival mode and just in this alert phase all the time. So just some telltale signs there that, the other thing too that we measure is a growth mindset or fixed mindset. So if you're stuck in kind of a fixed mindset around like, this is how we always do things, like you're really not open to change. If you're seeing that with your team, again, something to work on, right? Because we can't innovate, and we can't be at the top of our game personally and professionally in a mindset like that, or in a state of high stress, or not feeling rested, or not having the ability to emotionally regulate. Like those are the big foundational pillars.
That's super helpful. Mark, do you cover that in your book? My copy's still coming, and I'm curious, sort of like, is the content of your book stories of others and how they've used these practices and sort of the outcomes? And so, for our audience who reads the book, that's the takeaway. That's the kind of examples they're going to receive.
Yeah, the book. So that whole framing and those pillars came after the book. So there isn't a full, I wouldn't say the book is structured in that way. What the book does is gives us an automatic way to take 5 to 7 minutes each day to just give ourselves some good positive mental nutrition with a bunch of good reflective questions, not necessarily from me,
Awesome.
but from others, to reframe situations. And I would say, because it's hard to start building in tactics and practices and so forth if you don't have that self-awareness muscle built up, right? It's like you want to understand where you're at and where you want to be going, to then put a strategy in place. And the book is something that helps us check in with ourselves, helps us see around the corner of a situation, maybe through the eyes of Maya Angelou versus ourselves, where we're kind of biased to the situation. And it just gives different angles or lenses. And then by default, going through that process, then you start building your own mental fitness practices and so forth.
That's awesome. And then the upcoming books, what are those related to?
Yeah, the next one is kind of the evolution to personal Socrates, where I've just noticed, and I was in this position as well, that there's a whole group of us that have invested in our development and our personal development and so forth. And, we've got practices, we've got our morning routines and so forth. And all of that stuff has been fantastic, got us to this point. But then it's almost the very symptom of what I'm saying personal Socrates is. I wish people would provide the disclaimer of, hey, when you do this work, you're going to be a hell of a lot more self-aware. So you're going to feel a lot more too, to just as a warning. Whereas before you might have been numbed out and not even, notice what was going on. And that can be somewhat jarring at times, because then what happens, and this is what the next book is about, it's called Between Selves. It's like you feel like you have one foot in old self and one foot in new
Mm,
self, and you're being pulled back and forth because you're like, shit, I thought I worked on that. But here it is again. And I guess I need to, put a few more reps into this situation. But you can feel it, like, I know it's not where I want to be. So this isn't a new problem. I mean, this has existed since the beginning of time. But there's so many people, I think, that have gone and invested themselves that they're at this place. And I see this with the guests that come on the show. It's like, oh, that is exactly, where I'm at as well. So I decided to kind of stick to what I've done in the past, but thankfully, because technology allows me to do this even better, I'm interviewing samurai from the past, indigenous elders, Zen masters, ancient Stoics in the first person using AI, and then writing the book and the lessons from the teachings I'm getting from all of these people. They're not, they're not, I have some excerpts, of course, of some of these one-to-one conversations, but it's really leveraging the fact that we have so much information. Like, let's sit down with Marcus Aurelius and also bring
mm.
in a samurai that maybe would have existed in completely different eras. And let's have a chat about this living between selves. Like, how does that show up in your world? And it's been fascinating.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait. And to your point, right? I mean, I think back with self-awareness and some of the practices that have come in and out of my life. And then you try to map, like, was I at my top performance when I was doing journaling, or was I at my top performance when I was getting 9.5 hours of sleep, or was it a little bit of both? And then why is
Yeah.
it not in my life right now? And how should I bring it back? And like, you're kind
Yeah.
of tinkering over and over again.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's like the practices start to kind of self-sabotage you a little bit, and you've got to kind of reset and think, okay, what do I need now? Because now, even in this book, at one point, and this is where like, I'm going through this myself, so I'm writing it for me first and foremost. But at one point, I think it was one of the samurai, or it could have been a Zen master of some sort. They said something to the effect of, even even when we started having the conversation, and they said, Mark, the version of you that brought the idea to us has already evolved in our conversation, that you have to let that person die and have the new version of you write the book. And I was, I'm like, okay. So I said, mentally, I
Kind of.
understand what you're saying here, but we got to let that sit a little bit. And then, I've just been kind of in guiding, just noticing, there's kind of old version of me that's like, I need to have the structure nailed for this book. How am I, and really trying to plan everything else out versus just working with the material, having more conversations and letting stuff naturally surface. Like, the stuff, it's not a practice. I guess you could call it a practice, but it's not something I'm journaling on or doing breath work. It's just the noticing piece.
Mm.
And it's stuff like that again, this stuff, like, this is coming from the teachers that are the most studied and have written the most, texts on this and so forth. Like, let's bring them all together and have, I call them the council, essentially, and bring them together to guide us.
That's awesome. You've mentioned your podcast. I'm curious, how did that get started? What was your motivation? As a fellow podcaster, I always love to know sort of how those stories get started.
Yeah, the podcast, I mean, that's the greatest gift I think I've given myself over the years, if I think about it in retrospect. But it started in the actual app, so it's roughly 8 years old, and it started because, as much as I noticed journaling was a practice that was fairly consistent across all of these top thinkers, there was kind of still a perception out there that I'm like, oh, you're talking about the boy or girl writing about the crush at school, when they're like 10 or 12 or something. It's not that there's anything wrong with that, but no, I'm talking about questions that literally can change your life or change the direction of your company or your whatever outcome that you're searching and so forth. And what was lacking was that perspective. So I wanted to have conversations around how people were asking questions and good quality questions throughout their journey, because that's all journaling is, in my opinion. It's just reflection. And questions are probably one of the easiest ways to guide and stimulate that practice. So it started. I mean, the first one, I actually just visited the original location because we were in Montreal for a family trip, and the first interview was in this cafe that I was still working at my day job, and so early in the mornings I'd go in there and work on this new company, and I eventually interviewed the owner of the cafe because I'll never forget. He said, and for anyone in Montreal, if you're listening, it's September Surf in St. Henry or Atwater Market area. I remember him at that time. The cafe was just popping, full, lots of people. But when I was in there in the early mornings, less people, obviously, and then there was a little bit more downtime before things ramped up. And the owner would tell me, he said, "Yeah, it's really hard. I know on the outside looks like things are really going well, but like I'm struggling to make payroll right now." So I remember asking, I said, "Well, Mitch, like how are you handling that pressure?" And he's like, "I just started using this app, Headspace." And that app was just starting to come out, and so I'm doing these meditations, and then I'm starting to journal a little bit too. I'm like, "Oh, tell me more about this." And that was the first. I still have it on my phone. I put my phone on the table and hit the record, and it was the first interview. And I
That's
think the
all.
first 50 or 60 were written up more like blog articles, and then eventually I was starting to feel like we're leaving stuff on the table, because I mean, just naturally, I was getting better at the interviewing people, and then the podcast started, and it's been, gosh, over 500, I think, interviews at this point. To the point where you asked about what I do with teams as well. This is the this is the most exciting part. Is I'm also starting to be brought in to do private interview series with either leadership or teams to actually surface the mental fitness practices in their lives and what works for them and the questions and so forth. So then now it's not coming from me, it's coming from the team, and the use cases are very, very specific to their industry, which, as someone who loves to be behind the mic and do this, um, I'm trying to do more and more of that. So,
So you're
yeah.
working with the individual team members to assess their mental fitness and then come up with a sort of a team strategy to improve their performance, their high performance?
Yeah, sometimes it starts from that place where we'll do this assessment called the Agility EQ assessment, which hits on some of those topics that we were discussing earlier: sleep, emotional resilience, and so forth. But others, it's just a nice, easy kind of lob into the topic. I'll basically, the current podcast called Behind the Human. I'll use that framing and say, let's go behind the leader. And start with the
Mm.
CEO. Let's go through, interview various VPs or heads of sales, heads of marketing, product strategy, and so forth, and get to know them a little bit. A lot of people have no idea of their leaders' backstories, and what often comes out is, oh yeah, like you did the exact same job I'm doing, or started in that position. So that's always interesting. But then I really start to get into, okay, so how do what do you do to train your mind to work for you instead of against you? Or in huge decisions, big life pivots, career pivots, what question were you thinking about? What helped you? And then that's the stuff that then you start to see, oh, interesting. I mean, I could implement that kind of practice in my work. And then that's when we normally continue on, and we'll actually, do that mental fitness together. But the content, and what's nice about that is you can drip that content out throughout the whole year. So I'll usually do something like that, and then I'll come in and do a keynote or open one of their offsites. And then the content continues to live on as we continue throughout the year.
That's awesome. Wow, that's super powerful. Mark, audience member wants to get in touch with you. What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty accessible. Any of the social channels, Instagram, LinkedIn for sure. I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. Shoot me a DM and let's connect, or an email on my website. All the details are there. It's just behindthehuman.com or mchampagne.com, goes to the same place. And I guess my ask for everyone listening just because I know how powerful it is, just wherever you hang out, share a question that's changed your life or a
Mm,
practice that is like your non-negotiable and tag us so that we can reshare that because I guarantee you there's someone on the other side that will benefit from that share. And that's where we can stick together as a community and allow a ripple effect to happen where we all win, right? If someone on the other side is an entrepreneur and that's what they needed to get through today and keep going and see the right path, then who knows? We might be able to benefit from their product or service. But if their minds burn out, then no one wins.
100%. And what a great way to close out the show. I was going to say something similar, but not as eloquent. Mark, it's been great having you on our show today. I really got me thinking about the old version of me versus the new version of me and being between selves. So I'm super excited for your book to come out. Audience members, if you got some value out of today, please subscribe, please share this message. And as Mark just alluded to, let's tag a question, tag something that's been important in your life and share it with our community.
Love it. This was so fun. I mean, questions were bang on. The flow was awesome. You can see it in my face. I've got lots of energy. I mean, I'm biased, but there's nothing that lights me up more than having conversations like this. So thanks to you.
My pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits